रजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैर्तुष्टुवां सस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति नः इन्द्रो वृद्रश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नः तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रक्षुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वदाम् अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणं शिरसा गुरून् करिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good afternoon, everyone. So this is a new series, as you know, from all the discussions and deliberations that we've had last week and have been discussing this in our groups. We have a slight change in schedule to keep it more interesting and varied. So from this month, we're going to have alternate sessions of Gita, Chinthana, revision, along with our contemplation of chapter 6 of Chandogya Upanishad. So today is the first of this very many sessions over the next 12 to 18 months, looking at Bhagavad Gita, Chinthana, contemplation of Bhagavad Gita. So in a sense, it is a program for us, by us, and to all of us. So the more participation that we have, the better the program gets. And it is really for our own benefit and for our own homework that as a team, we have drafted this program. So on that note, I'm going to invite Sushruth Kulkarni ji and Neeta Kulkarni ji from Nottingham to start off today's session, please. So Sushruth, over to you.
Thank you, Madhu. Namaskar, everyone. Hari Om. So as Madhuji has said, we are going to start with chapter 1, also called Arjuna Vishad Yoga. So just a little background to Bhagavad Gita. It appears in the Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata, as we all know. Mahabharata itself is a massive compilation of knowledge and often referred to as the fifth Veda, although it is not truly a Paurushaya. It is written by Badrayana, but it is often referred to as the fifth Veda because of the amount of philosophical knowledge that is present in there. Bhagavad Gita itself is a very popular book, not only amongst Hindus, but also the Western non-Hindu philosophers, as they simply find it slightly easier to follow than the Vedas themselves. So let's start with chapter 1. Chapter 1 is, in fact, Bhagavad Gita is narrated by Sanjaya. Now, who was Sanjaya? Sanjaya was the charioteer for Dhritarashtra, but he was not just a charioteer. He was also a very trusted advisor for Dhritarashtra, and often he would send him as an emissary for his important decisions to Pandavas, and he would discuss important decision making with him. So he was not a simply lowly charioteer. He was quite an elevated person. He received a boon from Veda Vyasa for divine vision. So not only could he see what was happening on the entire battlefield of Kurukshetra, but he could also hear everything, and also he could glean the inner thoughts of the people who were actually on the battlefield. So it was not just a live telecast, it was even more than that, because he could read the thoughts of the people. What Sanjay represents is the ability to stand aside and be impartial and observe the whole war without any prejudice and relay the information accurately to Dhritarashtra. So let's make a beginning with the first verse, and I hand over to Jamuna.
The beginning. Dhritarashtra Vacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva Kim Kurvati Sanjaya. So the transliteration of this. Dhritarashtra said, the land of Dharma at Kurukshetra, having gathered, desiring to fight. My sons, the sons of Pandu, certainly know what they do, Sanjay. So that is a transliteration. I'll give you a much simpler translation in the next slide. Could I have the next slide, please? So to discuss this verse in more detail, the team has looked up translations from two different websites. So the first one is Bhagavad Gita /Gita.org. So to illustrate properly the consistency in the conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna battlefield, Veda Vyasa, who is also the full name Krishna Dvaipayana, has quoted the first 27 verses in chapter 1, beginning Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre, referring to Kurukshetra as the land of righteousness. Now, when Dhritarashtra learned that Lord Krishna had accepted the position of a charioteer to Arjuna, immediately was suspicious and became doubtful of his son Duryodhana's chances of victory. At that time, he asked his minister Sanjaya a redundant question as to what did his sons and the sons of his brother do in the first verse in chapter 1. Now, in the next paragraph, there is a lot of focus on the contextual relevance of where this particular verse was discussed. So the actual conversation described was between Arjuna's great-grandson, that is Emperor Jayamajaya, and he was talking to Vaishampayana Muni, and it was he who was expressing the words Dhritarashtra. So this is the actual translation, which is quite easy. Why did my sons and the sons of Pandu assemble at the righteous land of Kurukshetra, desirous of battle, do? Now the question which arises is what was a necessity of Dhritarashtra asking Sanjaya what to do? Because in the same verse, Dhritarashtra himself had said, they are assembled desirous of battle. One of the reasons why he is asking this question, Dhritarashtra, is because Kurukshetra is the land of righteousness. There is further discussion about Dhritarashtra's thinking. Kurukshetra is famous as a land of sacrifice for the demigods and also the order of Brahmajnana, knowledge of the ultimate truth for all living beings. Dhritarashtra was worried that under the influence of Kurukshetra's righteous land, his sons would have decided to return half of the kingdom back to the sons of Pandu, now that they are free from all jealousy. Is that a reason, or is it because he fears that the sons of Pandus, fearing the destruction of their dynasty in righteous holy war in a holy place like Kurukshetra, and have they then decided it is best to retire to the forest and live as renunciates for the rest of their lives? By addressing Sanjaya, Dhritarashtra means that by the mercy of Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, Sanjaya has become free from attachment and aversion, and thus he will certainly speak the truth. So Sushruti mentions in the previous slide, well, what is the relevance of Sanjay in this verse? And Dhritarashtra, by using the verb mamakaha and pandava, so mine and theirs, is referring to his sons and the sons of Pandu, indicating disparity. And this shows how Dhritarashtra did not accept the sons of his deceased brothers Pandu as his own, and this also reveals his enmity towards them. Now, as we have discussed in various lectures, Mahabharata has several meanings. So previously it was more the itihasa or the historical meaning, and now there are several meanings, and this is a more philosophical meaning. Kshetra also means cultivation. Just as in a rice field, there are unwanted grasses looking exactly like paddy, which must be uprooted. Similarly, the use of the word dharmakshetra is indicative that the unrighteous sons of Dhritarashtra will also be uprooted. Moving on to another website, holybhagavadgita.org. The two armies have gathered on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, well prepared to fight a war that is inevitable. Still, in this verse, King Dhritarashtra asked Sanjaya what his sons and his brother Pandu's sons were doing on the battlefield. It was apparent that they would fight, then why did he ask such a question? The blind King Dhritarashtra's fondness for his sons had clouded his spiritual wisdom, and he had deviated from the path of virtue. He had usurped the kingdom of Hastinapur from their rightful heirs, the Pandavas, sons of his brother Pandu. Feeling guilty of the injustice he had done towards his nephews, his conscience worried him about the outcome of the battle. The words Dharma Kshetre, the land of Dharma, used by Dhritarashtra depicts the dilemma that he was experiencing. Kurukshetra is described as Kurukshetra Devayagnam in the Shatapatha Brahmanam, the Vedic textbook detailing rituals. It means Kurukshetra is the sacrificial arena of celestial lords. Hence, it was regarded as the sacred land that nourished Dharma. Dhritarashtra feared that the holy land might influence the minds of his sons. If it aroused the faculty of discrimination, they might turn away from killing their cousins and negotiate a truce. A peaceful settlement meant the Pandavas would continue being a hindrance for them. He felt great displeasure at these possibilities. Instead, preferred that their war transpires. He was uncertain of the consequences of the war, yet desired to determine the fate of his sons. Therefore, he asked Sanjaya about the activities of the two armies on the battlefield.
So at this stage, we open up the discussion to the whole group. So anyone who wants to say something can please come forward, ask questions, and we'll have a discussion on the first verse, please. Anyone, any questions or anything they want to share?
Sushant, can I come in just to start off the discussion?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to pick up on two verses, two words, Shushrut, in the very first verse. One is Dharmakshetra and Kurukshetra. So one of the views there is that land where this battlefield was happening used to be called Dharmakshetra. And then there was the Kuru king who took that land and he practiced Dharma there. And after all, Kauravas are from the Kuru dynasty. So that land became Kurukshetra. Now, one interesting point there is before the land was called Dharmakshetra and Kurukshetra, it had another name before Kurukshetra. And those of you who are interested in this part of the quiz, it's called Samanta Panchaka. That was the name of the Kurukshetra, the land of 5 ponds. So that was one interesting piece of information I wanted to share. The other one I wanted to just bring on is when he says Mamakaha Pandavaschaiva. Yeah, so there is a Chakara and there is a Eva. So I think we have done this before. Although Chakara and Eva can mean similar things, whenever in the scriptures Chakara and Eva come next to each other, that has special significance. So here, when Dhritarashtra says Eva, he is clearly implying my family and Pandu's family. So he is doing the discrimination by putting that particular word there, Eva. So those were the two things I thought will be interesting to share and also to start off the conversation. Thanks.
Very nice, Mandu. Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to add anything?
Hello, Sushrut. I have also heard about this Samanta Panchaka, that Parashurama, after he killed all the Kshatriyas 21 times, he was asked to do some penance and some, sacrifice in that place. So to get rid of all what he had done that was wrong. And the sages asked him to do it, and he selected that place to do the sacrifice.
Oh, excellent.
This is I got from Mahabharata,
Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. And anyone else wants to add anything more? Okay, so moving on then. Then the next few verses are spoken by Duryodhana, and he starts off by speaking to Dronacharya rather than Bhishma, who is actually his commander in chief. He refers to the opposite commander in chief as Drupadaputra rather than taking his name as Drishtadyumna. And this is particularly to incite Dronacharya to fight because he has his long-standing rivalry with Drupada. He then reviews the armies on both sides and he enumerates 11 great warriors from the Pandava side and 7 from his own side. So that another number adding up to 18. We have discussed 18 number of times before. So this is another number 18 that crops up in Mahabharata. So what we now have to do is to delve into his state of mind and find out more about it. So over to you, Jamuna.
So Duryodhana's state of mind. So this is the 10th verse in chapter 1. Aprapyartam tadasmakam balam bhishmabhirakshitam paryaptam tvadameshetam balam bhimabhirakshitam. So the transliteration, unlimited that our strength by grandsire Bhima, safely marshaled. The next line, limited, but this their strength Bhima, carefully marshaled. Next slide, Shushruth. So moving on to the more detailed discussion. Now the question arises that if the armies are of both sides were equal in might, how is it possible that a victory is assured? Duryodhana gives the answer in this verse by using the word aparyaptam in the sense of being unlimited. Duryodhana, to conceal his fear, exclaims that his army is unlimited, and moreover, they are protected by Bhishma, who is the most intelligent and a Maharatha, whereas the Pandava army is protected by Bhima, who is of less intelligence. Thank you. This is why the Kaurava victory is assured. Another commentary, Duryodhana is implying that although his army is mighty, it is insufficient due to the fact that Bhishma Deva, being affectionate to the Pandavas as well as the Kauravas, is not totally committed to victory for him. But Bhima, being completely committed to defeat the Kauravas, makes the victory of the Pandavas stronger and more likely to be successful. Yet another commentary, so it may be put forth that if Duryodhana is so convinced of his superiority, why then does he need to assure himself? In this verse, although he states his army is unlimited by its tone, it implies by his reply that the army of his, with all its mighty heroes mentioned previously, protected by Bhishma, seems inadequate, whereas the army of the Pandavas, which is protected by Bhima, seems adequate to him. We'll continue with the discussion and the historical significance. The commander-in-chief of the Kaurava army was grandsire Bhishma. Apart from being an exceptional warrior, he had an extraordinary boon. He could choose the time of his death. This meant he was practically invincible. Duryodhana felt that under Bhishma's command, their army was undefeatable, whereas the Pandava army was secured by Duryodhana's sworn enemy, Bhima. Hence, he started comparing his grandfather Bhishma's strength with that of his cousin Bhima. Vinashakale viparita buddhi, as the proverb goes. This means when the end draws near, egotistic people indulge in vainglory instead of being humble in evaluating their situation. The tragic irony of fate is reflected here in Duryodhana's self-aggrandizing statement that their army strength secured by Bhishma was unlimited. However, both the Kauravas and the Pandavas were Bhishma's grandchildren, and as the oldest living member of the Kuru family, he was concerned about their welfare. He was also compassionate towards the Pandavas, but bound by his ethical commitment towards the throne of Hastinapur and its subjects. Therefore, half-heartedly, he led the Kaurava army against them. Bhishma was also aware that in this holy war, along with all the great warriors of the world, the Supreme Lord Krishna himself was present. Lord Krishna was with the Pandavas, which meant Dharma was on their side, and no power in the entire universe could make the side of Adharma win. He had vowed to protect the kingdom of Hastinapur and all its subjects and to fulfill his responsibility towards them. Bhishma therefore led the Kaurava army, even though he was aware of their wrongdoings. The decision of Bhishma accentuates his strength of character and his enigmatic personality. Over to you, Shashrat.
Thank you, Juma. Very nice. Shall we open this up for discussion, please? Anyone wants to step in and add something?
So, Suresh, just a quick, we just saw two things, aparyaptam and paryaptam.
Yeah.
Paryapta sufficient, aparyapta insufficient, or paryapta limited and aparyapta unlimited. I was just wondering, it was kind of giving two contrasting views about how Duryodhana's, how the perception about the army commanded by Bhishma and Bhima. So what would be, I don't know, I just saw two contrasting views there. I just thought that was interesting to note.
I think it gives a little bit of a confusion in his mind. He's still uncertain whether it is sufficient, insufficient, whether he will be victorious or not. So I think he's still a bit concerned about his the strength of the army on his side. Is my thoughts on that.
Yeah, agreed.
Can I come in there? Yeah, that's very interesting, because one of the interesting things is how we have learned over the years of reading and enjoying the Gita is in the language itself. There is a bit of psychology that is actually compressed in that language of Vedavyasa to explain how bewildered Duryodhana is. Here is a chap who's got 11 Akshohinis by his side, whereas his opponent has got only 7 Akshohinis. But still, as soon as he goes into the battlefield and he sees the fellows on the opposite side, the fellow gets scared. He's literally scared and bewildered, and he feels that he is going to lose the battle. And that's why the very first word he's using is aparyaptam. And like Sushruta, I also picked up on that from the commentaries. The meanings of aparyaptam and paryaptam. So if you look at the word itself, apta means what? Somebody who is well qualified, which is complete and so on. So we talk about apti and apta so many times. And when you say paryapta, paritaha apta means one who is complete, sufficient, competent. Yeah. So although he had 11 aksohinis, he should feel complete. But actually he is feeling insecure and incomplete, although he has 11 akshohinis, is how I have read the meaning of the verses, although I realize some of the transliterations that are available and out there in these websites seem to indicate the contrary. So again, it depends on the Guru Sishya Parampara that you follow. But from a pure Vedic Sanskrit meaning, paryaptam is very fine. Paryaptam means sufficient, as Suresh ji said. There is no controversy there. So that was one that I thought. So this fellow was bewildered and scared because his general was Bhishmacharya. He is an old fellow. He's an old fellow, and our Duryodhana has already got some doubts, because Bhishma is quite, he's almost aligned to Pandavas, and he is more friendly with Pandavas than Duryodhana's, because of the fact that he has had food in his house that he is actually fighting for him. He knows that, and he knows that he is very partial to Pandavas. So our fellow is scared because of that. And he says, Bhishma be Rakshitam. He is not sure, although this old man is doing something, what is he going to do? But note the second line, he said, Bhima di Rakshitam. Yeah, Bhima, he mentions Bhima, not the general on the Pandavas side. Who was the general on the Pandavas days on the first day? Drupada's son. Yeah, so he was general, but Bhishma was the general on his side, but he does not mention the general on the opposite side, but instead he mentions Bhima because he is dead scared of Bhima. He knows that Bhima is going to tear him apart and kill him in the battlefield. He's dead. So those words bring a lot of ideas in verse 10, which is a key verse. So I'm going to stop there and let others contribute.
And any other contributions?
Yeah, I had a question. This is Harish. So, Madhusudan, when you said he's scared, literally when you see the verse, it doesn't come across that way, right? It says that he feels that his army is adequate. Bhima's is not. But is the point that because he's making this point, which it seems redundant, and that's what reveals that he's scared?
I think
Harish, Suresh, go.
No, Madhu, please. No, I was just saying that what you just said, Paryapta is sufficient, and if you interpret Aparyapta is insufficient, he is literally scared in the sense that he is sensing despite the numbers, his army is insufficient compared to the careful, meticulous planning, and that too because he addresses Bhima, not Drishtadyumna. In the sense that there's a lot of fear, anxiety in Duryodhana's mind.
I think,
and also Harish sorry, go on.
No, I think he probably still has that vow of Bhima in the back of his mind, where he has sworn to kill all of the 100 brothers, and in particular break his thigh and things like that. So if someone has threatened you like that, it's always going to be at the back of the mind, and that's why he's referring to Bhima and not to Drishtadyumna or anyone else. So,
Right.
Can I come in?
Suresh, and the yeah, sure, Deval. Can I just finish off with one of Harish's point, and then I'll let it go. So Harish, one of the other things, if you see the sequence of verses from verse 2 to verse 9, in all those things that Duryodhana has said, he has always said the opposite. See, in his group, there were 11 Akshohinis, but he only names 7. But on the Pandava side, he has only 7 Akshohinis, but he actually names 2 ways. He gives 11 names of external warriors who have joined the Pandavas. Then he gives 7 internal people within the Pandavas family. So he lists more people on the Pandava side, although he has more Akshohinis. So all those are subtle indications that this guy is actually scared.
I think that makes sense. And also one of the translations refers to Bhima as having less intelligence. Is there any evidence of that perspective at all?
So Harish, my view on that is whoever thinks Bhima is of less intelligence, actually that person has no intelligence. So they should read the scriptures properly before they make such claims. So that is what I would say here, and I'm very open for challenge here. So it's very unfortunate if somebody has said Bhima is not intelligent. I would humbly request them to actually make an effort to read Mahabharata properly.
Got it.
Looks like Deval had a question.
Oh yeah, Deval needs to finish.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just having this Bhagavad Gita as it is in front of me, which translates aparyaptam as immeasurable and paryaptam as limited. So aparyaptam meaning more than paryaptam, but that was sort of a different. My question is actually slightly different. Why at the beginning of the war is it, I haven't read the whole of the original Mahabharata. I've only read translations. So is it a given that the side of the Kauravas is of adharma? It feels like it is a repetitive thing that is kept, it's people keep saying that, but I haven't found any evidence, clear evidence to say that that is what actually Bhishma believed or anybody else believed. This is at the beginning of the war, so whatever is happening till this point.
In my opinion, I think Bhishma is such a well-read and honorable person that he would make the right judgment well in advance, and he was simply acting the way he was because he was bound by his vow rather than by his heart.
So then how is that not adharma, is my question.
I mean, that in what way? You mean his actions are not adharma?
He's making a choice, isn't it? So he's making a choice about his vow. Rather, what I'm saying is it is portrayed simplistically. The explanation is portrayed simplistically. But was he really on the side of the, were Kauravas, all of them adharmic in a black and white sense, is my question. And
all of them were, but most of them were. There were a few exceptions, but the majority were swept along with Duryodhana's leadership, I think. Pragneshji has his hand up.
Thank you very much. I thought we could refer this to Karya Karana Shuddhi. So there may be actions, may say anything, but their motto behind those actions. So their fundamentals were not right. And if I go back a little bit, it doesn't address this, but the symbolic blindness of Dhritarashtra also says something that people should not be blinded for their own offsprings without having the clear, and having an assistance or moderation by Sanjaya with a divine vision is also symbolism where if we have been blinded, we should have a ally with somebody with a divine vision. Thank you.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Okay, I think we should go on because we have a lot to catch up with. The next things that happen are the sounds of war, and Bhishma first of all starts by blowing his horn very loudly, and then there is chaotic blaring of all the different sounds of instruments from the Kaurava side, and I'm not going to go into the details of that for a specific reason in this one. After that, the Pandavas start blowing their horns, and they do it in a very specific order, starting with Lord Krishna, followed by Arjuna, and so on. And I think we have covered that in a quiz before. They are blowing their conches in a very specific order. And all these sounds are actually amplified by Sri Hanuman. So does anyone want to come in and tell us where Sri Hanuman is located on the battlefield?
On the flag of the chariot.
Excellent. Yes. So he is on the flag of Arjuna's chariot. So it is called Kapit Dhwaja. So he has given a boon that all the sounds that are coming out from the conches will be amplified by him, and that actually drives fear into the hearts of the Kaurava army. So we hand over to Suresh for the next verse.
Thanks, Ashok. Yeah, the stage is perhaps now set, having probed into what's cooking in Dhritarashtra's mind, how Duryodhana is thinking. What's happening in the mind of our protagonist, Arjuna, the undefeated, the one who has the protection of Vayu, as Shurshuk just mentioned, and who has Lord Krishna himself as the charioteer. And these are the first words that Arjuna says, Senayor Rubayor Madhe Ratham Sthapaya Me Achyuta. And he is actually talking to Lord Krishna, who is referred to as Hrishikesha, the controller of all Indriyas. He is telling Lord Krishna, position my chariot between the armies. So, the commentators bring out some important points for us to contemplate on this. So the question is, why does he want his chariot to be positioned between the armies? Is Arjuna just a mere spectator? Does he just want to see? So the question is answered by the next two lines, where he says, Yavadetan niriksheham yodhukaman avastitan kairmaya sahayodhavyam asmin ranasamudhyame. I just want to see, I want to see who are these people who are going to be fighting against me and who are going to be fighting for me. And here Krishna is referred to as Achyuta. That's another point that the commentators bring out, the infallible. So an interpretation could be that he is telling, he knows Krishna is going to position the chariot exactly in the right vantage point, so he can actually accomplish his wish of inspecting both the sides of the army. So what could be the reasons? There are a couple of other things that the commentators do bring out. Is Arjuna still desirous of making peace? It's important to remember that war has actually commenced. Conches have been blown, which literally meant that signal to proceed with the war was given. And in some aspects where people were prepared, they have already started fighting. But is there something still in Arjuna's mind that is saying that maybe if my chariot is positioned between the armies, the might of Lord Krishna's firmness could be seen? And is there still a hope of peace emerging and the war not taking place? So that's another angle for us to contemplate on, as one of the commentators do point it out. But to me, two aspects come striking and for picking this verse, where the first thing is, this is the first thing that Arjuna is saying, and this lays the foundation for the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, he's telling Krishna, drive my chariot and position it between the armies so that I can witness. So the self-importance, and if one interprets Shariram Rathamevacha as our own body as the Ratha, then this becomes a dialogue between Nara Narayana, Arjuna asking a question on behalf of all of us, where if we think that we are the owners of our body and our Ratha, and that positioned between two conflicting sides, how does one have to deal with it? So a question could be interpreted that way as well. So to note here is that the infallible Achyuta is being instructed by Arjuna to place the chariot between the two armies such that both the sides of the armies can be inspected. So Shraddha, back to you.
Thank you, Suresh. Any thoughts on Suresh's verse?
Sushit, can I come in briefly?
Yeah.
On the beautiful concept that Suresh picked up on Shariram Ratamevacha. So I just wanted to remind, sorry to go back. So when Dharmakshetra, in the very first verse itself, that concept comes, and we forgot to deal with it, I think also, is Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre. Yeah, if you look at that word Kurukshetra, and we all know this, when you read Bhagavad Gita, you read it as a itihasa, and you also read it as a philosophical text. So if you view it from a philosophical perspective, Kuru and Kshetra. Kuru means what? Action. Action means what? Karma. So this action, karma, where do we do this action? We do this in this Mrityu Loka. And using what do? We use our sadhana sharira to do this action. So this Kurukshetra itself means that sharira that Suresh was talking about. And that Kurukshetra, and again in chapter, and the following chapters in Gita, as you know, Kshetrajna, the concept of Kshetrajna comes in the knower of the field. If the body is the field, Kshetra, the knower of the field can be the soul, and the knower of all fields, of course, is the supreme being himself. So those concepts also come in. So that view of viewing Bhagavad Gita as a itihasa or a history, but at the same time you viewing it as philosophy, then you get a completely different view on this one, that this mind needs to sit in the middle of this battle that is happening between evil and good, and we are constantly battling this using our body itself, is how the philosophy progresses there. So I want to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhu. Okay, so then Arjuna surveys the battlefield, and obviously what he sees is the Swajana, his grand uncle, his teacher, his cousins, other relatives. His limbs then begin to tremble. His mouth goes dry. The Gandiva starts slipping out of his hand. And he then begins his side of the argument, which is against the war, why he should not be fighting this war. So there we can sort of start viewing the conflict in his mind and the attachment that he has to his relatives. So the arguments that he puts forth is that there is no point in achieving victory for kingdom or for pleasure. I'm going to get a lot of sin by killing my relatives. And he even refers to Duryodhana as a terrorist in one of the shlokas. But even then, although there is not supposed to be sin attached to killing a terrorist, he still thinks of it as a sin because he is his relative. He even wonders whether it is acceptable to retaliate if he is if they start fighting with him, whether he should retaliate at all or just sit quietly and receive the blows. He then talks about the sin of exterminating a family on the Pitrus because they will not be able to do the Shraddhas, and how the whole family tree will be affected. He talks about the ruin of the women of the community, because all the men will be killed in the war, so the women are going to not have any protection. The youngsters will not have a guiding hand, they are going to go astray. And he also talks about mixing of varanas, where different varanas will have to intermarry in order to keep the progeny going. And all these are the arguments that he puts forth to say, I should not be fighting this war. So over to you, Suresh, for the next one.
Thanks, Ashrat. So Arjuna's defense against war continues, and perhaps he towards the conclusion, and this is where he's in his mind, it's becoming pretty clear when he says, Aho batam hat papam kartrum vyavasita vayam yadrajya sukalobhena antus swajana mudhyata. Alas, aho batam atla. I mean, what is this? I mean, there's a sense of revelation there, in the sense, oh, I have realized what on earth we were about to do and commit this heinous crime. And for what? For the sake of material pleasures, that we are going to kill our own people. So that's where Arjuna's in his mind, it's perplexing. It's kind of irony that what were we doing? How did I ever end up in this situation of having signed up for this war? The commentators bring out some interesting aspects for us to look at, and as Shrushruth had just mentioned, is war justified? Does the very act of war, or even just considering it, that the thought of war, would that constitute heinous crime? So, so it's important to keep this perspective and look at it. And the fact is that the war has actually started. And maybe this is Arjuna's perspective, but it's his own perspective. And it's not that it's a unanimous perspective at this point of time. The other couple of thoughts that do come in is can we sense some repentance in Arjuna's words? And for what? Are we sensing any irony and that he had committed to himself, that there's some guilt that in his mind? So these are a few aspects to dwell upon which the commentators bring up in describing this shloka. But the point is that here is Arjuna, who, having instructed Krishna, Achyuta, to position the chariot between the armies, is now telling Krishna himself that, you know what, this war is sin, it is wrong. And this is what he's trying to tell Krishna. So that's how I have read this shloka. So back to you. Or maybe just on the next slide, a couple of other points before I hand it back, perhaps, is just in the last box there. A few thoughts along with this was, what is it that we make out of Arjuna's character? I mean, in the beginning, was it just arrogance? Was it overconfidence? Do we see a sense of weakness in Arjuna's mind towards the end, or is he being truly altruistic? Or many a times, is Arjuna not to be blamed at all? He's just a victim of circumstances. That's how things could even have been interpreted. But end of the day, here is an aparoksha jnani, Swayam Indra Sambhuta. Even if we discard the Adidaiva part of it, here is an economist, a highly intelligent person of his time, who from this overzealous, overconfident position is now suddenly in a state of self-pity. How did this happen? So these, I thought, were some things between these various shlokas of Arjuna, from his first shloka towards the end, is what emerges as we looked at these shlokas. So just, that was another couple of points I thought I just mentioned before handing it back to you.
So anyone wants to come in and say add some points, Madhu? You're muted.
Those points were so well put by Suresh, and I just want to add in a couple of points here. As Suresh mentioned in verse 20-21, Ratam Stapayam Me Achyuta. So when our man has said, take my chariot and take it to the battlefield, there was his ego and arrogance. So we all know that Gita text is not only itihasa, it's not only philosophy, but it is a masterpiece on psychotherapy and psychology and psychiatry, or whatever you want to call it. There are very many psychotherapists in this audience who would know much better than me. But we all know that Krishna was the world's first documented psychotherapist and a psychiatrist who gives this Arjuna a dose of his own medicine. So here was a fellow who came with all sorts of egos. And our Shastras also tells, as how Suresh ji said, here is an aparoksha jnani. How does this aparoksha jnani suddenly get ego and arrogance and so on? So when this happens, we should always remember this very first verse of Keno Upanishad, which our gurus remind us at this point. Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha. Yeah, the mind, although Arjuna may think that it is under his control, the mind is not under his control. The mind is ultimately under the control of the Supreme. So at that point, the Supreme himself instills that in Arjuna, so that a whole, the flower of philosophy comes out for the benefit of whole of mankind. So that was the first point I wanted to say there, that here was this guy who was arrogant. So what then Krishna said, okay, come on, let's go. He said, go and put me in the middle. So Krishna could have placed him in the middle of the battlefield. At some point in the battlefield, he did not have to place the chariot right in a position where he's able to see his relatives on both sides. Yeah, after all, there are Akshohinis, right? There are thousands and thousands of soldiers all over the place. He could have gone to some corner, but he decides to place it in a position where he is able to see his relatives and his kith and skin. And that is where the bitter pill that Krishna brings about and makes Arjuna go through his own thinking process. And then he illustrates how his thought process was completely skewed and wrong. Initially, it feels like he's making sense, and as our acharyas and gurus remind us, in all this ranting of Arjuna, Krishna is smiling. He is just smiling and said, "What is this fellow talking?" And in chapter 2, very first verse, he gives him a bit of telling and gives him the lessons of philosophy. So that is how I also read through this particular verse. But let us not forget that Krishna is the first documented psychotherapist of Sanatana Dharma. Thank you, Sushil.
Thank you, Madhu. Anyone else wants to add anything more to it, please? Okay. Right. So moving on then, come to the last shloka. Sanjaya vacha eva muktarjuna sankhe rathopastha upavishat visirjya sasarmam chapam shoka samvigna manasa. So here is described the pitiful position of Arjuna. He has decided it is better if they kill us. He is casting aside his weapons, his mind completely clouded with distress and grief, and he is sitting down in his chariot. So I think this picture is very nice, and it conveys the position of Arjuna in the last shloka of this chapter. So with that, I shall finish. And anyone wants to add anything to this chapter, please step in. Thank you.
Sushil, there's a small point here about this whole verse. So the verse is very clear. It says Arjuna sits in the chariot. Yeah, he's actually put his Gandiva and he is sitting on the chariot.
Yeah.
He has never got out of the chariot. He is actually
Yeah.
sitting in the chariot, is what the verse is saying.
Yeah.
Yet there are so many pictures out there that you can see when you do Google image. You will see this Arjuna standing outside the chariot and Krishna giving him lessons and so on. But actually, that is not what happened. Arjuna was actually in the chariot. He never got out of the chariot. And the whole discussion happened between Arjuna and Krishna whilst Arjuna was sitting in the chariot. So that was, I thought, an interesting point.
Yeah. I think this picture is very nice. It just conveys the, yeah.
So this is a unique picture because most places I haven't seen it. Maybe I need to nick this from you at some point.
Anytime. Anyone else wants to add anything?
Shishru, just going back to the discussion about Bhima and Duryodhana's mindset, isn't the rule of the war that you fight the other person with the same, like a person with bow and arrow will fight bow and arrow. So that is also one of the reasons why Duryodhana could be talking about Bhima rather than anybody else.
But then,
because they are all using different.
Yeah, but Bhishma is not using a gada, is he? So he's talking about Bhishma and Bhima. So they are not really going to fight each other.
No, but I mean, the rest of the discussion is true. He is worried about Bhima,
Yeah.
because they are sort of equal in, yeah.
Well, valid point, but a couple of things there is. Bhima was not only well versed in Gada Yuddha, he was well versed in all forms of warfare. In fact, the Shastras tell us the Gandiva bow, there are only few folks who could lift the Gandiva bow. One was Arjuna, the second one, the first one was Bhima, the second one was the Arjuna, the third one was Krishna. So I'm just giving it as an example that Bhima was well versed in all forms of warfare, not just in Gada. The second one there is, why is Duryodhana actually mentioning Bhima? One of the answers there is, as you know, the whole of one view of Mahabharata is everybody is descending upon as some form of avatara, and then there is this whole thing that plays out for our benefit is one view there. So if Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu who has come down, and Duryodhana is the symbolism of Kali the demon. Yeah, he comes down. He's Kali himself who comes down, who is full of ignorance. And for him to be defeated, you need somebody who is full of knowledge. And that full of knowledge from the Upanishads, when you read all the Upanishads, that full of knowledge person is described in the Upanishad as Vayu or Madhyama Prana or Mukhya Prana or whatever you want to say. So the one who is fully ignorant needs to be defeated by the one who is fully knowledgeable. So that is one view on this. I hope that was useful.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
Very nice explanation, Madhuji. Very nice. Yeah. Bhima, I know as Vayuputra, but I never thought it in a philosophical way. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Madhu. Also, about the question about Bhima, there is a part, isn't it, where they say that there's no one like Bhima in the whole of Mahabharata. Bhima samo nasti, Bhima, that shloka is there in intelligence as well. Bhima sena samo nasti, senayor ubayorapi, pandityecha patityecha. Yeah. So that is very clear that Bhima was very intelligent and had all the qualities.
Thank you, Neetaji. And also, Bhima was the most powerful as well. So one thing that we forget is, in those times, 5,000 years ago, in the Indian forests was full of cannibals. Is full of cannibals, human eaters, and whom we call as Rakshasas, Pisachas, or whatever you want to call them. And it is believed that in historical sense, from an Itihasa perspective, one of the greatest contributions of Bhimasena was that he eliminated a lot of Rakshasas and in that part of in India at that point of time. He basically eliminated a lot of cannibals in India. Yeah, so that is also from a historical perspective is one of his contributions from his physical strength. So one, Neetaji was mentioning about his spiritual strength, and I just wanted to bring up the physical strength where he eliminated all the cannibals as well. So some schools of Vedanta give a lot of importance to Bhimasena, and there are some schools of Vedanta that give importance to, say, Arjuna. So it depends on how you look at it. But when as Neetaji mentioned, when you go through the scriptures, it's very, very clear that Bhimasena was actually a central figure who is celebrated in many areas, but we don't see it forthcoming in many commentaries, but that's fine. But at least it gives us an opportunity to discuss about his contributions in historical India. Thank you.
Okay, so we will move on to the...
Sorry, there seems to be a question on the chat.
Sorry, I didn't look at that. Yeah, what you can take it, yeah.
Does this mean self-pity is not dharma when performing our duty? That's an interesting question. So, simple answer, I don't know. But I think what is dharma, what is adharma, I guess Krishna himself says is one of the most difficult questions to find an answer to, even for the most knowledgeable ones. So, but I think here the question is not so much of whether self-pity is an accepted form of behavior or not. It is just it's the sway from, somebody who said that who are those who have dared to enter into a battlefield and face me? That was the kind of pride with which Arjuna entered into the battlefield, a proponent of war. And now, having seen his own people, and unfortunately of the 18 Akshohini Sainya, he's able to just spot his own relatives. And seeing that, now he's in a state where he's saying, even if they come and kill me, I'm not going to raise my arms and even fight and resist. It is this, the movement of Arjuna's character, I guess, has been the focus, not so much whether self-pity as an aspect of behavior itself, whether that's acceptable or not is how I would interpret. But whether self-pity is acceptable or not, I think it depends, perhaps is the best consultant answer. But that's the only extent to which I would know. I don't know, Madhu or anybody else, if you could please throw more light.
Suresh, I would have thought instead of self-pity, there was submission. So the self-pity and submission, you could say they are slightly related, but they are also not related. If, for example, our man had gone to Arjuna initially with submission, then that would be doing the right thing. But he went, as you said, he went with arrogance and ego. And then, as I said, the bitter pill has been given by Krishna, who is a psychotherapist. So now this fellow is going through this process of self-pity. And hopefully in the next week, when we discuss him, his self-pity will turn into submission. And then the dharma will well. So self-pity possibly is not a positive attribute. I think submission may be a better way of looking at it.
Madhu, here self-pity means selfish, selfish emotion, is it? I mean, self-pity means in this.
Yeah, that's also a very good point, Shilaji. Yeah, self-pity. You're somehow you are assessing yourself and coming to an assessment of this. Yeah, there could be a bit of selfishness that comes with it. Yes, yeah.
Because maybe
another reflection of his ego.
It's all mine and me, isn't it?
In fact, in that verse that Suresh mentioned, there were three. He said Ratam me, then he said Aham, then he said Mama. Then he puts three in one line. Three again. So that was again picked up in many bhashyas in commentary saying, look, he's put three times me, me, me. What an egoistic fellow.
Yeah, just one more comment on that question about self-pity or whether it is right or wrong. I think because it is not appropriate or not right, that's why Krishna corrects it, isn't it? That's why he has that correction, or all the philosophy that follows is because it was not right or not right for the time.
Well, okay. I suppose self-pity can never be a virtue. So
yeah.
Anyway, I think time is...
Sushruth mentioned it, isn't it? That Naranarayana, I don't know who spoke, I don't know, one of you said, if you think as Naranarayana, so that means he was a self-realized soul. So Krishna must have put him in Vishnu Maya, so that all this can be showed it, open to us like mortal souls, so we can learn many things from this, even though it's difficult.
Okay, so I think it's time to move on to the quiz, otherwise we will overrun. So I hand over to Nita, our quiz master.
Thank you, everyone. I think it was amazing. All the discussions were amazing. I forgot I was doing a quiz. So let's move on. So first thing before I say, definitely this is not a competition. As I've mentioned before in the previous quizzes, it's all just a learning, another way of learning. And there are many meanings for all the verses. So what might be put up as an answer may not be the only answer. So you might have alternate answers as well, but that's one of the suggested answers from some of the commentaries that I have read. And maybe you might need a pencil and paper for the last one. If not, you might be able to do it without that too. So let's move on with the first question. I'll give you about half a minute to
1 second. Let me
to think about these and then answer. So let's go to the first question. And Madhuji has covered these sort of army formations in the past, and we've also covered this in one of the previous quiz questions. First question is, what was the one unit of the army which consisted of these, the picture that I've shown above, 1 elephant, 1 chariot, 3 horse-mounted warriors, and 5 of the infantry warriors. What was the one unit called? And also there's a formation called Chamum, or part of the army called Chamum. And how many elephants would be there in one Chamum? This might be a bit tricky, but you can have a go. And also the shloka where Chamum word appears. I'll try and keep a tab on, look at the text, the charts as well to look at the answers, okay? So I'll give you a few minutes, a few seconds.
That's 30 seconds.
Yeah. Anyone wants to actually answer this verbally? Okay. Let's move on to the answer.
Can I answer? It is Patti, like Suresh, I think
Yeah.
someone told.
That's
And
correct.
Chamum has 243 elephants.
Oh, yeah.
Close.
Yeah, close. It's a tough one. You need a calculator, isn't it? Because how many threes? You're right. That was a bit
Oh,
tough.
729. Sorry, 729 elephants. Yes, it's
Yes,
3 times.
729
5
elements.
times. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Thank you, Shilaji. It's a great attempt to do that. I put elephants because it's easy, one patti and the same number, so 1 and 1, so you don't have to calculate. And we all know that 3 anikinis, 3 chamus make 1 anikini, and 10 anikinis make 1 akshohini. And you're right, it's the third shloka which has chamu word in it. Okay.
Next.
So next question is, name the music instruments used at the beginning of the war. Okay, but I'll give you a clue. There are 5. Thank you. Okay, I can see all the answers coming through there. Horns, pranava, drums, kettle drums, gomukha. Excellent. Okay, so here are the answers. Shankha was also part of that. So, Shankha, Panava are drums, Anaka, kettle drums, Bharia, bugles, Gomukha are the cow horns. So you can get it in, all this answers there in the 13th verse. Tata Shankascha Bharyascha Panavanaka Gomukhaha. Yeah. Okay. Next question. I've tried my best to put the pictures. They're not possibly not exactly what they were used, but that's what means. Okay. So question 3. So what I want you to do is tell me who is the odd one out in this group of 4 people or warriors, and why. So 1 and 2. Yeah, both of those. Okay, think about it.
Okay. Time's up.
Yeah. Okay, so I can see some answers here. So Vikarna, they will, yeah. So you put Vikarna as for the first one. Why Vikarna? And Jagdish Bhattji as well. So if you want
Because he's on the other side, isn't he?
Yeah, that's correct.
He's on the Pandava side, yeah.
Yeah, or on the Kaurava side, and the others are on the Pandava
Vikarna is
side.
on Kaurava side.
Sorry. Yeah.
Vikarna is on the Kaurava side. And the second one.
Someone has put Drona. So
Oh,
why
yeah.
do they think
Jagdish
Drona?
Bhattji, why Drona?
Have you reduced your sound?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can, but your voice has gone a little low, Nita.
Oh, okay.
You've not changed anything.
Can you hear me better? Is this
Yeah,
better?
it's better now. Yeah, if you can
Yeah,
speak a
maybe I was
little louder,
far
perhaps.
from the mic. Okay.
Somebody put Shvetaketu. Is it because he's immortal? I don't know.
Okay.
The second one is hard.
Second one is hard. Ashwatthama is the right answer. What is the reason? Pratibha ji?
Hello.
Huh.
Yeah, I felt that he was the one, Chiranjeevi. At the end, he was the one left after Drona and others.
Yeah, that's one of
Drona, Karna, and Bhishma.
Yeah, that was also one of the answers. Yeah,
Suresh has given the answer. Actually.
Suresh, you want to explain?
No, in the sense he was not the commander. He never became the commander-in-chief of the army. All the three others actually commanded the army.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay.
Actually, he did become commander. He was the last person standing, so he did become commander as well.
Yeah, I agree.
But
actually, he was not. The rank is lower, isn't he?
That's correct. Yeah. Rank was lower. So here's the. So thank you everyone for the answers. Let's look at. Sorry, I have to get out of the chat to come back.
Click.
Okay. You clicking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Vikarna was from Kaurava army side, and Ashwatthama was captain, and others were general. But I think that answer, we had also thought about the answer that Pratibha ji had mentioned. It's about Chiranjeevi. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Question 4. So we all heard the story about Bhishma blowing the conch, starting off the war. So, and the reason that was given was Tasya Sanjanayan Harshan Kuru Vruddha Pitamaha. So in this verse, who is denoted by Tasya? Him. So that's the question. And there are multiple answers. You can think of different reasons or different people as well. Okay.
Trick question.
Yeah. Okay, I can see answers coming through. So
Can I answer as well, because I can't type that wrong.
please,
I felt
anyone, everyone's welcome to.
Sanjay says it to Dhritarashtra, so it may be mentioning that. Or when Duryodhana was telling to please him, Bhishma, Tasya Sanjana, Tasya may be for Duryodhana as well.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, Duryodhana. That's right. So to please, because Duryodhana's mind, he was doubtful, he was anxious, he was scared. To please him, he does.
Bhishma.
That is one main person that he's. That's what Tasya denotes. There could be possibly other explanations.
Sanjay may be telling it to Dhritarashtra to please him, that because he also asked the question that what are they doing, and he was scared that Duryodhana, because of that Kurukshetra Dharma Kshetra, he may get changed and he may not fight the war. Is that the reason?
The conch was blown by Bhishma. So this is, why does he do to please whom? That was the question. So,
that is Duryodhana. So if it's that way,
so it is also possible. The other explanations given in one of the books is that it was also for the army of Bhishma to sort of motivate them, and also for the army of the enemy, because he knows that they are righteous and want to sort of help them or motivate them. For Bhima, because he knows that Bhima, as you have heard in the story, that he likes Pandavas as well, because he knows they're righteous. And the Vayu Avatara in Bhima, And we should not forget that Bhishma is a great devotee of Sri Krishna, so he wants to please Sri Krishna or Sri Hari as well. So those are the other reasons possible that that Tasya word denotes. Okay. Next question is, so we all heard a lot about Mechyuta in our discussion. Arjuna saying, take my chariot to the middle of the battlefield. There are more verses where I and mine are highlighted, and I think the 22nd one was also mentioned by Sureshji in his chat, and Madhuji also mentioned one or two. One actually, can you think of another one where I and mine, Arjuna mentions I and mine? Okay. Verse 23. Yeah, Suresh, you want to chant that verse? Or read it?
Yotsya kama navasteksham ya etra samagataha dharta rashtrasya durbuddhe yuddhe priyachakirshavaha.
Yeah. So where does the aham come? Yotsya vekshe aham. Yeah. So it says, I desire to see those who have come here to fight on the side of evil-minded son. There are other verses. I think what we should do is take it as homework to see, find other verses which say aham or mine or mama. So that would be like a little homework when you get back home to look at other verses. So next question. What does Sri Krishna say in chapter 1?
Nothing.
Okay, so most people have answered as nothing. I can give you a clue that actually the clue is in the picture there. Anyone wants to answer? Clue is in the picture, although it's not, one more clue, it's not directly said by Krishna, but you know who is reciting this, the first part of the story. So it's, Krishna says it, but through Sanjaya. Another clue.
25th verse. भीष्मद्रोण प्रमुखतः सर्वेषां च महीक्षिताम् उवाच पार्थ पश्येतान् समवेतान् कुरुनिति.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Shilaji. That's correct. So Bhishma Drona, so he's gone and put the chariot or stationed the chariot in the middle of the battlefield, and he's pointing to them and saying, that's the picture there. Presence of Bhishma Drona. Look, this is, behold, these are the Kurus gathered here. Okay, so he's pointing to that. So Sanjay actually is explaining this to Dhritarashtra. So that's the part where Krishna says, although I agree that everyone we are looking for, even I thought initially that he's not said anything. And when I looked carefully, there was one bit that I found. Okay. Question 7. Why should such a great scripture be preached on battlefield? Okay. Think about that.
Because here philosophy, here, you know, what it comes, our lives comes, you see, our life is a battle between the good dharma and adharma, because mind is a place where all this thing takes place. It's like a battle itself. So I thought that's why they chose the battlefield.
Yes.
Because even the yuddha is between the dharma and adharma there. So, and in the daily, everyday life, I think dharma and adharma comes, isn't it? So we have to choose what Krishna said and what Krishna taught us, and we have to practice in our daily life. Is that the reason?
Yeah, that is one of the things, as Madhuji has also explained, that kshetra is the body. So you can take it that way as well, definitely. Any other answers? Oh, sorry, look at the chat. Vinashakale Viparita Buddhi, someone has put. Yeah.
Sanatana conflict, practical.
Yeah. So Pragneshji, do you want to explain? You put practical there. That is sort of something related to the answer. Do you want to please explain?
Yeah, because this, as we started with the Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, this is every day happening in our life, right and wrong,
yeah,
to be or not to be. This all conflicts continuously happen in our day-to-day life. So to make it, I would say, contemporaneous and applicable to everyday life, it was done at the battlefield.
Yeah. Okay. Deval, do you want to explain Sanatan conflict?
Well, I mean, we've heard in all these talks about how Sanatan as an eternal is the principles on which Hinduism is based, isn't it? So your mind is always in conflict eternally. And so it's at war. So it's the same point that people are making, but eternal as in it sort of it. So taking Pragneshji's point, even though it is in the land of the dharma, that's what is eternal, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That great answers.
Gita ji, can I come in? One point
yes,
to make
yes.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So one thing I was going to do, if you just go back to the previous slide, why this great scripture to be preached on the battlefield? You may remember we did this initial thingy about why Brahma Sutra, for example, is an exalted text, because you need to have the right teacher, you need to have the right student, and you need to have the right environment in which that particular discussion happens. So that's what happened for Brahma Sutra, and that is why Vedanta Sutra is considered as the highest philosophy. Similarly, Gita is also considered as the highest philosophy and the great scripture, because the great teacher Krishna himself is teaching a great student who is Arjuna in an ideal environment, which is the battlefield. And as all our friends here were discussing, the battlefield could be the real battlefield, or it could be the battlefield in our minds. So that battlefield that happens, that is the right environment. You don't want to talk about philosophy in a pub. You want to talk about philosophy when it is required to solve a particular solution. So great student, great teacher, ideal environment, and that is the reason why this was preached in the Kurukshetra. The other one is, people may ask, why was Arjuna picked? Why did Dharmaraja not picked up? Because he was the eldest among the Pandavas. So that is a side point. Arjuna had this problem, and Krishna taught him, and it was an ideal situation.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Madhuji. That's that very nice explanation. Pragneshji, you have your hands raised.
Also, it is said that it was written by Sansari, it was narrated by Sansari, and it was meant for Sansari. Arjuna, Lord Krishna, and Vedavyasa, all three being Sansari here. Thank you.
Nice point. Okay, so I think Madhuji's explanation is actually a full, complete explanation. This is part of it is part of that answer was like time. So it's important that when it is preached, so time is important. And especially, again, there was discussion about slipping from the dharmic path. So this is the right time when Arjuna needed that philosophy. So question 8, it's from verse 15 about blowing of conscious. Poundram Dadmau Mahashankam Bhima Karma Vrikodaraha. So what is the meaning of Bhima Karma and what's the meaning of Vrikodaraha? Yeah. Thank you, Deval. Anyone wants to say it? Because the typing is difficult. If you just want to.
Rakodara he has got a big belly like Deval said. I mean, they explained it with, I think, jackal or fox or something. I mean, that was what in the Bhima Karma, because his job was like that, wasn't it? Bhima Karma. I don't get it fully. No.
That's right. Eating ferociously. Deval, you're right. That is the Vrukodara part. Let me put the meanings up. Bhima Karma is one who performs Herculean tasks. Bhima is, Herculean Karma.
Herculean tasks. Okay, Herculean tasks. Thank you.
And Vrukodara is wolf-bellied or ferocious eater-like wolf. Vruko is wolf, and Udara, as we all know, is belly. Okay, so I'll move on because of time. Right. So first, this is from verse 2. Acharya Mupasangamya Raja Vachanamabravit. So who is Acharya? That's the easier part of the question. And how does Duryodhana address him later on, and why?
Good job.
Okay, so I can see some answers on the chat. Yes, everyone is right about the first part. It is Dronacharya, and Madhuji has put Dvija. Right. So Madhuji, I'm sure you'll be able to explain why Dvijottama or Dvija.
The first one I want to is Acharyam in the second verse, Neetaji. That itself is significant because in the Kaurava side, Bhishmacharya was the general. So this Duryodhana should have gone to Bhishmacharya and he should have spoken to him because he is the general. But what did Duryodhana decide to do? He did not trust Bhishma. Although he was a general, he thought, oh, this fellow is partial to the Pandavas. So he shamelessly, he goes to Dronacharya, who is not even a general. So that is one, again, to take up Harish's point. So this fellow was scared. Even in that second line, we get that idea that how he was scared. He should have gone to Bhishma, but he went to Dronacharya. The other one is Dvija. Dvija, as you know, is that particular in the Varanashrama in the Vedic times where you have your Upanayana, as how Sudarshan's son has had his Upanayana today. Then you become a Dvija, then you go and read Vedic studies and you become a great saint or a sage. So Dronacharya was a great Vedic scholar, but it just happens that he joins, unfortunately, the Kauravas, and he actually becomes a semi-Kshatriya, although he was a Vedic scholar by his profession. So that is how I've read this. But that Acharya is significant because it signifies the Duryodhana's petty attitude towards the general.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Madhu. That's very nicely explained. So Dvijottama is again the same thing as mentioned, Brahmana, and one of the best Brahmanas. So it's actually praising him. There are a few questions. One homework question: should a Brahmana be taking part in the war? So if you can just research that as part of the homework, whether he should even be fighting. Was that?
Neeta, I'm so enthusiastic to put another one in the previous verse. He has also said Rajan. This fellow is not even Raja yet. He is only a prince. But still this Duryodhana has already claimed himself to be Rajan. He is not Rajan, he is a prince. So that every word in that line it shows his scariness, his pettiness, his arrogance and everything. Sorry, I'll stop.
No, absolutely. I think every word and the way they have been placed as well, including how the Ashwatthama's name comes first in amongst the captains, that was also quite important as well. So yeah. Okay. Last question, might need a pen and paper. So first question is, please give 9 names of Sri Krishna mentioned in chapter 1, and how many names of Sri Krishna are there in all 18 chapters? Just the number for the second question. And if you can start, you can write down the 9 names, or you can start putting them in the chat, whichever way you want. Yeah, you can. Sorry, I think we need more time for this.
Okay.
It's okay. There should be more. You need more time for this question. So if you want to just say the names, that's fine. Yeah, Madhusudana is right. Rishikesha, Govinda, Madhava.
Sorry, that's supposed to be Vasudeva.
Yeah, okay.
Auto typed, and then there is Gudakesha. I think I ran out of time.
Gudakesha is Arjuna's name.
Gudakesha is
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Janardana.
Yeah, it is Arjuna.
Janardana is right.
Janardana, yes, correct.
Janardana, Achyuta, Keshava, Hrishikesha, Madhava, Krishna.
Okay. Anyone for the last few, 1 or 2?
Govinda.
Yeah, there's just one more left for the bonus point.
I thought you will ask this, so I'd studied it. I forgot it.
One
Paper
more.
was leaked, was it?
Okay, so till you're thinking of that last name, it will be revealed in the answer anyway. So how many names are there? Who wants to have a go at that one? How many names total? How many sort of number?
18 chapters.
Is it 18? Because everything is 18.
Many more than that?
No, I don't know. Not thought about.
Well, there should be 1,000, because whatever, even Arjuna is the name of Krishna.
Yeah, they will completely agree. Every word denotes Vishnu. So yes, every word in Gita would be, but actually, like for practical purposes, yeah. Okay, ready? Anyone wants to have a guess? Pragnesh ji, you're getting closer to the number, but there are still more than that.
Tripai is telling Vishnu Sahasranam. Sahasranam.
That's not in Gita.
Yeah, all the ones. Okay, let me go. About the names. Right, here are the names.
Oh, Varshni, I've written it, but then I couldn't. I've written Varshneya, but I didn't know whose name that was.
Oh, okay. So yeah, Varshneya, coming from Vrishni's sort of lineage. So, and I put the verse numbers there, and the total I've not put it in here is 36. That's something I found on the website. I've not actually counted, but 36 names. And it will be very interesting actually to learn the meanings of these words. And we have done one in the last time, Rishikesha. And also Suresh, you mentioned about Achyuta, meaning of Achyuta. Okay, so there we that.
Actually, I was going to say that 36 is also a multiple of 18.
Absolutely, yeah, we thought of that, Harish. Excellent, yes, that's right. Multiple of 18, and 9 is half of 18. So So it's very interesting, isn't it? 18 number keeps coming up again and again. Very interesting.
So Neetaji, 9 is also important.
Yes.
Navadware Pure Dehi.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that was part of the last quiz. Yeah, Navadware Pure Dehi. Yeah, everyone was very interactive, amazing. Thank you so much for taking part in this quiz. Now, before I end, Madhuji, you want to anything to finish it off with?
Hand it to Madhu. Yeah.
Hand it, yeah.
Yes, sure. So Shushut, so maybe I'll do the vote of thanks, and maybe next time we'll have somebody else to do vote of thanks.
No,
I think
vote of
this
thanks.
Vote of thanks. No,
It's not
it's
formal.
not
It's
formal.
just summarize everything.
Yeah.
So
No.
I think the key there, I think we learned from chapter 1 is, although it sets the scene for what happens in the rest of the chapters, and as we know that Gita is divided into Shatka 1, Shatka 2, and Shatka 3. Shatka 1 is the knowledge, Shatka 2 is the bhakti that comes with it, and the Shatka 3 is a combination of the first and 2, the second that is discussed in the Shatka 3. Although the first chapter, the first Shatka is considered as setting the scene for the philosophical discussion. Certainly, my gurus have said one of the most important chapters in Bhagavad Gita is chapter 1. If we understand the chapter 1 properly, then the rest of the Gita becomes even more interesting. Because what we have, of course, not dwelt in detail, but I hope it'll enthuse us to go and do some homework is, all the individual warriors that have been named, Duryodhana and so on, that have all been named, it'll be a great exercise for us to go back and say, why did Veda Vyasa actually give those names? Let us not forget, it is Krishna Dvaipayana or Veda Vyasa who is the composer of Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. He has documented the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. That is how we read the Gita, as it is a work of Krishna Dvaipayana, Badarayana, or Veda Vyasa. And why has he listed all these warriors? What is the significance of each warrior who has been listed there? That itself is an amazing piece of work, because if you do that, you would have actually have read through the whole of Mahabharata as to what happened between each warrior, their relationship with Krishna or Pandavas or Kauravas, what happened in their story. There's a lot of stories in Mahabharata, as you know, not stories, events in Mahabharata. And that is the reason why their names appear. So Veda Vyasa has not randomly picked these names of warriors. Each one has got a significance. And then, as how Shushruji mentioned, the number 18 is all pervasive in chapter 1. So when we look at this number 18 coming up in chapter 1, we should immediately think about the Shatprashna Upanishad, about Shodasha Kala Purushaha. And we should think about all the Upanishads that we have read about the significance of 18. So those are the two key take-home message from me. And also the other thing about chapter 1 is we should all aim to be Arjuna. I think we are all constantly Arjunas every day in our lives. So try and inspire how Arjuna was thinking, how we go through the same phases in which Arjuna goes. I go through this every day in my life. When I go into work, it almost feels like it's Kurukshetra happening all the time. And not even at home, possibly Kurukshetra is happening. So how do we kind of resolve all this? So that is also a key sort of inspiration to read the Gita. So I was going to say, what a wonderful program today, Sushrut and Neeta. Thank you so much for putting it all together. And I think it keeps a template. It puts a template and no pressure for the team that is coming next the following week to pick it up and go with the first half of the chapter 2. I think this template works very well. I think everybody is interactive, and I think it's enjoyable. You don't have to, you're getting a lot of information, but at the same time it's more relaxed and enjoyable. So I really learned a lot. So thank you so much. And I'll open it for discussion for any other feedbacks. But I think the format really works. I think this was a trial. This was a phase 1 clinical trial. So we can directly go to FDA approval and keep it as a standard practice for forthcoming sessions, I feel. So, but I'll open it for discussion. And again, thank you so much for Suresh, Jamuna, and Neeta and Sushrut for showing the enthusiasm to get this organized. Thanks.
Can I just say the bar is set too high for the actual drug to be given now. Sorry.
Thanks to Veena, actually, one of the suggestions was from Veena to make it like coming as a story.
Yeah,
that was a great suggestion.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you have any hands that's raised. Okay, so in that case, shall we close today's session? And in the best tradition of Sudarshan, why don't we recite Om and then we close today's session? Harish, do you want to lead us?
Sure thing.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week. So next week we continue with our Chandogya Upanishad. We go to the next very important verse, Vacharambana Shruti. So join us to have a whole-scale discussion of that. So Hare Krishna and see you next week.
Hare Krishna, Krishna.
Hare Krishna.